Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holacek. I'm a Ukrainian historian and philosopher, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Eye on Ukraine. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the overall military strategy in the Ukrainian-Russian war as of today, which is, I argue, attritional on both sides, attritional in a different way. If you've seen the show before, you know the aim of the show is to introduce you to Ukrainian culture, to Ukrainian history, and the emphasis of the show has been on the war, given the reality of the war over the past 3+ years. So let's look at, I'm fascinated by, as you know, I've been talking about Russia's really poor bargaining position over the past year or so. Increasingly, Putin sees himself in a very strong position for bargaining, yet he doesn't ever even consider going to the bargaining table and talk about ceasefire and end to the war. That would be his ruin. Anyways, if you've ever seen Monty Python's wonderful movie, The Holy Grail, and at some point, it's in the background here, you see King Arthur meets the Black Knight. And King Arthur gives his spiel that, if you join me in my quest for the Holy Grail, I'm looking for the best knights and so forth who are willing to share in my venture. And the knight is quiet while Arthur speaks, and at some point he gets in the way and says, "No, I won't join you. He says, you'll have to fight me." So they engage in a fight, and Arthur lops off the knight's left arm. The knight is undaunted. He goes, "Just a scratch." Arthur lops off his right arm. Can't hear hold the sword, and says, "Well, get out of the way now. You haven't any arms." He goes, "Yes, I do." He goes, "No, you don't. You haven't any arms." And so the knight comes up, starts kicking Arthur in the rear, and Arthur gets somewhat infuriated by the boldness of this rather stupid knight and lops off his left leg, and the knight again is undaunted. And then at some point he lops off his right leg, so there's just a stump of a man left, bleeding to death. But still, this Black Knight is resilient, and he enjoins Arthur to keep up the fight because he is willing to keep up the fight till one or the other perishes. And Arthur rolls his eyes, and he and his men just walk past the knight incapable of movement. This, I think, is increasingly Vladimir Putin's position, Vladimir Putin's Russia, as the war drags on, especially since Operation Spider's Web on June 1, which was a brilliant tactical maneuver by Vladimir Zelensky, which was a year and a half in the planning and executed to perfection, which will be in all the history textbooks, history of texts that talk about the history of the world or the history of Russia or Ukraine. Really was brilliantly done, well planned out, and it's changing the way warfare is conducted, right? It's more economical, doesn't involve soldiers as much as conventional warfare, involving the drones, and aimed at striking at the heart. The idea here is to strike at the heart of Russia's capacity to conduct their war by destroying their warplanes, their ships, by deflating the morale of the soldiers who are not fighting on behalf of Russia, they're fighting for money, and so forth. So on the one hand, I think that's Putin's position, and it always strikes me that as his position weakens further and further, he gets bolder and bolder with his aggressive rhetoric. He's not willing to compromise on anything. And that's not astonishing to me because it's part of the Russian DNA in terms of presidents or czars and so forth, never to show any weakness, no matter what. In fact, were he to do that, he would probably be immediately, quote unquote, deposed, thrown from power, and perhaps liquidated. Now, Russia still is counting on, and I don't know that Putin, I think Putin really believes this, that his attrition attritional is to throw more and more men into the war at the front of the war and gain more territory. This is a conventional territorial understanding of war, where I'm going to invade your territory and try to take as much of the territory as I can. At some point, take all the territory, then I've won the war, as mentioned. So Russia is losing a prodigious number of soldiers, each over 1,000, sometimes up to 1,500 to 2,000 a day. And it's estimated that they're losing some 40,000 troops per month. Yet they've been able, and they continue to recruit some 50,000 soldiers a month by promises of large stipends. So at some point, they have 146 million people, roughly speaking, as of January 1, 2025. And they still have a large number of people from whom they can recruit upon the pledge of money. The question is, where are they getting this money? A lot of the soldiers that died that have promised money are the family not getting money. As I said, the casualty rate is extraordinary. Over 1 million casualties. Many of those are soldiers' deaths, right? And the idea is this conventional notion of warfare is Putin thinks he's gaining territory, right? And he has gained territory, there's no question. Are these territorial gains sustainable? That seems to be not the case. Would there be a surcease of the war? Would they be able to hold on to those lands? That seems to me quite debatable, unless Ukraine agrees to some sort of a peace treaty in which they would grant at least temporary occupation of lands by Russia. You would see those lands of Russia, at least for the time being. In the same way that Berlin was partitioned after World War II and so forth. In part, a large part went to Russia and so forth. But anyways, there's this consistent, loud and booming rhetoric that comes out of the Kremlin from Putin and Peskov and other such people that talk about that there's no slowing down. We're winning the war. Why should we make any concessions? Because if we keep going the way we're going, we're going to win the war. And of course, that seems to me complete bullshit. They do not have the monetary resources to continue the war. The economy is somewhat stable in a manner of speaking, so far as they're able to still create military weaponry and equipments. They can't do tanks anymore and so forth, but they don't have the artificial intelligence capacities for mechanized warfare. They have no, and it's even increasingly doubtful how well if they're going to be getting further drones from Iraq because of Iraq's tenuous situation with Israel at the present time. So we have this attritional strategy from Putin, which seems to be not sustainable, certainly not sustainable in the long term. I don't think that, there's not money for conduct of the war, I would say probably throughout 2025. I don't see him being able to continue the war throughout the year with the state of the economy, even though they're producing weaponry to some extent, replacing some of these things and bullets and guns and so forth. The rest of the economy is falling to shit. I mean, the food prices are exorbitant. The quality of living is nil in Russia, especially in non-urban areas. So this whole notion of attrition is based on the gambit, I should say. It's, he's continuing the war, and that's his gambit, and he's hoping that at some point, by sheer persistence, the West will break. He does have a significant break with the United States, seemingly unwilling to provide further aid to Ukraine under the Trump administration. Trump seems to be, at best, wishy-washy about any sort of economic aid, military aid, and so forth to Ukraine, monetary aid. Whether that is sustainable given the state of the Congress and given the state of Trump's presidency, he's not doing too well. After his military parade was a shambles and so forth, and the protests across the nation. And hopefully he will be thrown out of office, but I don't know that Vance is going to be any better. It could be substantially worse. Anyway, Ukraine's strategy, on the other hand, is attritional as well, and attritionally logistical, as it were. They're fighting a war. They're hoping on consistent Western unity. I think Zelensky knows he can't count on Trump. Trump's just a complete buffoon. He's a complete ass. And there's no question that he's a Russian asset. He's a buddy of Putin. And even recently said, after another phone conversation with his pal, Comrade Krasnov, said, I don't know why he was, Russia was kicked out of G8 because, you can't, if you want a peace plan, you can't have a peace plan if you're not able to talk to somebody. He fails to recognize that Putin has history. He's just a complete killer, bloodthirsty killer, a land-hungry tyrant who wants to rebuild the USSR. Even on one occasion said the USSR still really technically existed, never ended. So he doesn't understand who Putin really is. And if he does understand, that's even worse because he shows himself to be a person who's similar. I was watching a recent video and Trump was talking about Kim Jong-un and said, when he speaks, his people stand up and listen. He goes, boy, I would love for the American citizenry to do the same when I speak. No clear indication this guy he loves the position of a tyrant. So going back to Ukraine, they're hoping for, and so far this has been consistent, that they're hoping for Western unity, that the countries like France and Italy and Germany and England that have pledged support both verbally and monetarily will continue such support. Okay, and their strategy is attritional, not in terms of trying to win battles on the ground and recover territories. They're trying to resist as best they can the advances of the Russian soldiers, and there are somewhat 600,000 soldiers on the ground still, even though 1,000 plus die every day. The idea is to use military intelligence, to use AI to strike at Russia's capacity to continue the war. And Ukraine's been fighting a brilliant war. Historians and tacticians of battle in years to come will be studying key events in this war. From Ukraine's sinking of Russia's main warship early in the war till the Operation Spider's Web in June 1, right? They're counting on continued sanctions, hopefully further sanctions. The West and the United States upping matters in forcing further sanctions of anyone doing business with Russia in buying Russia oil through its fleet, right? That's shipping oil to other countries like India, China, and so forth that need Russian oil. So anyway, the idea here is we have strategy on both sides of attrition. One is a sort of a logistical attrition by Ukraine. The other is a territorial sense of attrition, but it's a meat grinder approach of just sending gobs and gobs of soldiers to the front and knowing you're going to have large losses on a daily basis and being fine with that so long as you can recruit additional soldiers. As I said, the overall, it seems to me, Putin's position is a very weak bargaining position. He's no better off than the Black Knight who meets Arthur who's on his path, his quest to find the Holy Grail. Anyways, so I think if things go on as planned, if Russia continues the war and if there's continued support from Western nations, the most important nations of Europe that are democratic and pro-Ukraine, I think Putin's in trouble really, really soon. He is gambling, as I've often said, on a break. He's got the break with the United States. He's gambling on a break, say, with Germany or England or a large nation like that threatens the European unity in their succor of Ukraine in its efforts to defeat Russia. And that's the only way this war will end. Russia has to be defeated. I think the military pundits know that, and the leaders of the Western nations, except Donald Trump, who somehow thinks Ukraine is massively losing this war. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this show. We will do more, and I will introduce some cultural aspects of Ukraine and in further episodes. And I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll do more later. TTFN,